We are now. So here we are, back again to the fun time.
Easter Monday here in Wellington at Bryan's house.
Yeah, we've photographed the blood moon, the eclipse and blood moon, and that's kind of, I suppose, got us thinking about a whole lot of stuff, including how our culture has been shaped by religious tradition. And Nick was talking about dualism.
Yeah, I was going to ask Bryan more about it, so because I'm no great expert on things theological or philosophical, so Bryan was making mention of it online before, and I asked him some questions which were probably a little bit fragmented, to say the least, so I thought I'd get him to actually expound on it a little bit for us now.
Well, a medieval scholastic system for bringing together the two powerful forces that were impinging on Europe, and that was the early Christian movement and, of course, the philosophy of the Greeks. And this meant that contrary philosophies had to be combined. And so they developed this kind of dualistic system of thinking. And well, we could debate the pros and cons of it, but I think in the end it came down to a huge conflict between developing religious thinking, the Reformation, and the Counter-Reformation, and how to sort out something that would be workable, I think, in terms of the religious and philosophical thinking of the day. It's really quite complicated to explain, but if you go and you read a little bit about it, and there is quite a bit on dualism, and you only have to go to Wikipedia to do it, so you get the sort of background of what dualism was all about. But of course then it got extended into philosophy as well, so you got Cartesian thinking, dualism, yeah, mind, body, and all the rest of it. On the one hand, the philosophers were talking mind and body, but then, you know, you had this holistic approach that was coming from the early Christian church, that these things were in unity, they weren't divisible. And so the fact that this didn't actually get really sorted out and there wasn't any agreement is actually still plaguing us today, isn't it, really? I mean, you've got these opposing views of what reality really is, and what is the basis for actually judging reality. What do you think is going on there, Nick?
Well, I'm sort of feeling my way with what Bryan's talking about. The problem I have with the way we're looking at the world is that we actually look at it. Everyone looks at it from their viewpoint, but we've got some overlays there which we don't know how to put in relationship to one another. And obviously, Justin, Dave, Bryan, you're all adherents of faith, and I'm probably sitting out there as the outlier because I'm not particularly. But having said that, I realise there's this dualism which Bryan's talking about, which is inherent in pretty much everything we do. And you know, quite often you'll hear people in a sort of a modern vernacular context saying, you know, we don't understand the spirit of this thing. And they talk about the spirit of the game, if they're talking about a game of football, or the spirit of something else. And what they're actually referring to in my mind is a need or a part of that dualism which actually they can't identify. They can't, you know, most people don't identify or know is there because they don't live that experience. I think people with faith probably do. I don't know how you see it.
Well, there's a kind of philosophical monism that develops and dominates a sector of the world. For example, Buddhism, Hinduism, basically comes down to a monistic view of reality. But in the West and under Judeo-Christian thinking, there is subject and object. There's,
Yeah.
you know, objective and subjective. There's myself, an individual, you as an individual, set against something which is not you. And so, I mean, it's not really that easy to explain just when you just open up a discussion about it and say, well, this is what it's all about, because there are actually two traditions really. I mean, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zen,
Semitic.
it's all been based along this whole notion that there really is no self. We get a whole history of self from a Judeo-Christian position. You know, man was created as an entity, he exists. Woman created, exists, separate from all else. And there is this issue of extinction. Well, of course, for Buddhists and the Hindus, if there's no self, there's nothing to be extinguished. I mean, what's important to us is our essence, our ontology.
Yeah.
And we worry about what's going to happen, for example, after this body has actually run its course. You know, what about the essence? Does that continue? And these are the preoccupations. The two traditions have similar preoccupations, but completely different ways of resolving the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I was in this conversation, all of us were in this morning. I made a very flippant sort of throwaway comment about the lack of spiritual belief in the current Western tradition, where we've actually, you know, got more adherents of the automobile and programs about it, and we've got people who go and actually celebrate a tradition which has been going on for a couple of thousand years.
Well,
I find that rather bizarre. Yeah.
No, I thought that you're on the money, and the thing is that, look, this is for our hidden reality, and so the people that are part of that group will know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is no good. This is no good going, although it'll go through YouTube, and then we'll put it onto our hidden reality. But anyone looking at it on YouTube is going to be completely lost because
mystified.
they don't have the background. And that's quite good,
yeah.
really, because that's the way we're going to load it. There are other ways we could do it, but I find it easier to deal with it that way. So,
yeah.
I mean, Nick, you were on the money. You said something that was really... And the other thing, by the way, Nick actually... it's a little bit sort of self-depreciating when he talks about not having sort of, like, he refers to a group of us having faith and Nick being on the outside. Well, actually, I actually think Nick's got quite a lot of faith. He might even have more than some of us who actually profess to say we have. And also, the thing is that I kind of get the feeling like, I talked about being Christ haunted, but I get the feeling that people who are who suffer from that particular malady of picking up something from a culture that was once quite dominant, but still having it in their background like a shadow, you know.
Yeah, I actually see that fully alive. I'll give you two examples. Bryan's onto it. I do not have theological faith in the sense that a lot of people have. But the one thing I refer to on a constant basis is the message. For example, I believe in Jesus as a historic character and a philosopher who actually came across with a message which is as powerful today as it was when he did it. Whether that's got anything to do with religion or not is not the point in my book. The impact of that message upon culture and upon humans and how we act is there. It's alive, and it's in the background how we do things, but we never seem to acknowledge it because we've divorced ourselves from it. Another example, I'd encourage any of you who can get onto YouTube and watch a series on the English Civil War, which is I was watching the other night. Very, very interesting, because they were reading letters from one individual, this particular woman, Brilliana Harley, to her son who was at Oxford. and to her husband, and various letters from people in London to other people. And the one thing which is, very obvious in it is that they thought in religious terms. They actually, you could see it in what they had written. God was in their letter, and their faith was in their letter. And, when you listen to Cromwell, when he speaks, he refers to God's will. And you think about that in a Western context today. Cromwell's a thoroughly modern man, but the language he's using is thoroughly unsecular. It's really quite amazing.
Well, Nick, I think I would disagree with you about Cromwell being a thoroughly modern man, but I understand what you're saying, and of course the thing is that the Christian era is quite distinctive as opposed to the post-Christian era, as opposed to modernism and postmodernism, and they're kind of like impinging on us all the time, this whole thing of secularization, lack of religious faith, lack of faith, almost full stop, lack of faith.
Yeah. I think it's a lack of reference is the bit which I find really disturbing.
No, I think you're quite right. You're again on the money there. And of course, we can't live without faith anyway, So, to quote Tennyson, we have but faith we cannot know, for knowledge is the things we see, and yet we trust it comes from thee, a beam in darkness, let it grow. Well, I mean, in a way, who is it that can actually step out of their place of living and engage with the world, or indeed even within your own house, if you don't have some kind of faith? I mean, you have to actually believe that actually what's going to happen next is predictable and have faith that it will be. Otherwise, it would be sort of a rather Dali-esque kind of world. You go to pick up the telephone and it turns into a crayfish. I mean, what sort of place is that? And,
I wish you would, because that way if Tin are organised, I'll go and pick up the telephone right now.
But unfortunately, we've got the advantage. Nick is actually very well read, and he's very able, and I think actually very impressed with the rest of the group. Justin and Dave.
You're all onto it.
Justin and Dave, despite Dave trying to tell us that he's not really an academic, he's quite capable, and Justin as well. Justin is out there working with his hands, probably the only sane member in the group, because he works with his hands. It's really important to be orientated, and I mean, we live in our heads a lot, I think. I certainly do, particularly since I managed it.
I've had the gross misfortune, if I might put it, to waste my life in commerce. And, I've been in sales and service and technical areas and so on, and you know what? It's merely cranking a bloody handle. It's got nothing more to it. So, if you can leave something distinct as something crafted, or you can leave yourself something as a result, like Dave, you might have actually arrested someone who really deserved to be arrested. I think it's a far greater achievement than I'm looking at.
No, but actually, Nick does wonderful landscaping, gardening, and he's a great little builder. So I have noticed that when he's had a project, he's actually quite a different person. A project where you work with your hands and you're orientated towards reality, if you like. I mean, like, if there were other philosophers around at the moment, they'd be saying, what do you mean by that? Well, we're not going to get into that. And I think Dave realises the futility of it all, because we're kind of like pedestrians, really. I mean, we have common sense views of the world.
Yeah.
And it actually comes back into this thing about faith and reason. I've got a real sort of commitment to that. I think that faith without reason is actually a nonsense. And I don't mean to be disparaging, because there are religious groups that separate it. There are people who actually believe that, a blind leap of faith is what's required to have some religious commitment. Whereas I tend to be of a belief that faith and reason are two sides of the same coin. So I do actually kind of fall into that, if you like. It's a vaguely Reformation position which was thrashed out, where the Reformers rejected a lot of the philosophical knotty issues that were impinging on the Christian belief system. And I think the synthesizing of Greek and Hebrew caused a lot of those problems. So once they accepted, it's kind of like it was really the Greek philosophy kind of polluted the Judeo-Christian position. And it's caused, it has ongoing implications. So I think the position that I went in, first of all, was that I kind of like favoured Reformation. And then I went back to the original, to where the Judeo-Jewish history developed, and the distinctive paths that Judaism and Greek philosophy took. There is a strong difference and a separation. And when you start to try and synthesize these things, that's where you get some problems. So maybe, Nick, you should just pick up on that if you want to.
Well, I won't pick up on that to any great degree, because I still struggle with the concept, but I can see the implications of the whole thing. One of the things where Bryan touched on is this extinction. And this is, do we create heaven on earth, or do we go to heaven afterwards, or we do something in between? And this is one of the articles of faith. And I'm not going to talk about this to any great degree now, but it'll be on the next thing Bryan and I do. We'll actually talk about those implications with regard to our physical realities and our spiritual realities.
Yeah.